To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer these slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. God, Hamlet, make up your bloody mind, for Christ's sake. As gorgeous and profound as it is, this 33-line soliloquy is primarily about a man who completely cannot make up his mind, something which Goethe and others have argued for years. Simon Critchley and Jameson Webster write about this indecisiveness quite poignantly in their book, quote, Hamlet waits, hesitates, and is divided from himself in his madness, all during the dreaming of redeeming cataclysmic violence. In this view, Hamlet is a creature of endless vacillation, a cipher for the alienated inward modern self in a world that is insubstantial and rotten. Critchley and Webster posit the idea that Hamlet is an anti-Oedipus, one who knows of the truth from the ghost's mouth before the tragedy unfolds, and this truth renders him paralysed by his disgust for existence itself. Where Oedipus steps into tragedy from ignorance to wisdom, Hamlet is forced to move into tragedy from a position of wisdom, and as such, he finds himself in a state of inertia. Inaction so overwhelming, he contemplates suicide. Except the possibility of life after death wearies him further, for the notion of endless suffering is enough to paralyse him even more. Like two positive magnets, thought and action, they pull against one another. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied over with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. The only way Hamlet closes the gap between thought and action is through theatre, play within a play, intended to capture the king's conscience. But sadly, it's entirely fictional. The play is all for nothing. Even in the main play, Hamlet only acts and kills Claudius after the poisoned rapier has stabbed him. He acts when he only has a few moments of his life to live, and only a few actions left in the play to cast. He casts them wisely, but arguably too late. Since I was little, I have always been an overthinker and a chronic worrier. Anxiety has been part of my soul since my earlier school reports, and every hiccup, badly phrased sentence or error of judgment that I've ever made or will ever make has gotten so profound that I've become physically ill from the symptoms of stress. Overthinking is a draining process. When our brains are kind of stuck on repeat, they're sucking any energy that we have to give to the outside world and bringing it inwards. This is why, when we're overthinking, we feel restless and exhausted and often paralysed and sometimes bedridden. The overthinking brain is a relentless critic. It undermines our confidence and demeans every aspect of selfhood, comparing us to others and preventing us from taking any action. My overthinking stops me from posting a new video or writing a new script or uploading that podcast episode, writing that chapter of my thesis, or even reading a book, because I've overthought the process so much that I've come to the horrific conclusion that I'll just do it all incorrectly anyway, so what's the use? What's the use in my existence if I'm destined never to be good enough? Destined to be too annoying, too lazy, too ugly, too stupid, that everyone will hate me. I'll never be purely good, I'll always be flawed, with people who despise parts of me that I can't change, or parts that I can change but I can't change fast enough. This continuous chatter clouds all decision-making and action, from reading a paper to leaving the house, texting someone back, or uploading one of the 40 podcast episodes that I've recorded and just abandoned. I know, I'll never get over it. I'll always be haunted by it. Yet, in an ironic twist of events, overthinking is an avoidance strategy that makes us more disconnected from ourselves, because it prevents us from genuinely exploring who we are. I know that kind of sounds impossible for that to be the case, because considering how overthinking seems to be a hyper-focused and productive methodology of introspection, albeit a dark one. After all, isn't it better to think too much than not think at all and being careless? Well, in reality, overthinking is what philosophers would call bad faith. Now, we've all heard the term bad faith primarily in terms of arguments, but in philosophy it means something else entirely. Jean-Paul Sartre argues that bad faith is a state of inauthenticity, an intended attempt of the individual to evade the responsibility of discovering and understanding one's authentic self. Sartre claims that humans consist of a double property, a facticity and a transcendence, and bad faith, quote, does not wish either to coordinate them nor to surmount them in a synthesis. Facticity is all the concrete realities of our individualness, our past, our appearance, our childhoods, our adulthoods, our jobs, etc. In fact, our pasts can be understood as a totality of our concrete realities, from where we went to school to our evolving styles and relationships. Transcendence, on the other hand, is our ability to move beyond the immediate situation, i.e. into the future. Bad faith is thus the denial of our transcendence and firm investment in our facticity. In other words, we live our lives like actors in a play, performing according to a role pre-written by our facticity, and any idea of being we could be beyond this role eludes us. In Overthinking, Sartre says that we live in bad faith and cement the reality of our limitations according to our pasts. We believe we can never be what we want to be because we do not have the resources to be that person in our facticity, and thus we deny ourselves the possibility of attaining them by denying our transcendence. In psychology, a more popular name for this concept is Carol Dweck's fixed mindset, the belief that all our abilities are innate and cannot be changed. Sartre effectively discusses the idea of neuroplasticity in mid-20th century philosophy decades before Dweck proved it in clinical psychology. However, when I was reading about this, I would argue that Sartre didn't really consider anxiety when he wrote about transcendence. Because surely when we overthink all the mistakes we can or will make, we conceptualize a transcendence that we don't want to actualize. So we freeze. The problem, therefore, is not that we deny transcendence entirely, but rather we can't imagine an alternative transcendence, one in which we are not a failure, one in which we are not rejected or hurt or miserable, humiliated, hated or unsuccessful. I'm not here to shit on Sartre's theory, it is a thought I had whilst I was writing this essay. And honestly, this, you're watching right now, this is the part of the script where I paused for a while because I started overthinking it, and what was a couple of seconds for you was in reality 3 days for me. Overthinking is a byproduct of stress and trauma, anxiety and depression, and it ironically worsens these conditions. It seems to be a tragic part of human nature that, in an attempt to run away from the brutality of overthinking, we aid our condition with counterproductive measures. So we'll scroll on social media, we'll consume bad news, we'll read the comment section or binge watch videos or television shows. The things that don't engage but instead numb our thought processes. Yet we are not numbing ourselves. We are overstimulating our brains to the point of numbness, only adding more noise to an already chaotic maelstrom between our ears and disconnecting from ourselves even further. By trying to take our mind off overthinking by consuming mass amounts of media, it's basically like trying to quiet our minds by sinking our heads under the surface of ice-cold water. Yes, we're no longer overthinking, but our body is still suffering in other ways, in this case, freezing and suffocating. So really the problem is, how can we visualise a positive Sartrean transcendence when we never add any counter-narrative to the one that we already have firmly established in our psyches, and only ever add noise to that? For Hamlet, the decision was made for him. The answer for the rest of us is that it'll be different for everyone because we all overthink for different reasons. When evaluating why I overthink, I realise that most of my concern lies not in how I feel about myself, but in how others would think and feel about me. In other words, I actually overthink because my greatest fear is being perceived. For others, overthinking may stem from a fear of horrific outcomes, or ruminating on every possible awful thing that may happen, from going on a train or an aeroplane to going outside, being fired from a job, or being rejected or broken up with. But what if, instead of standing static, allowing for the whirs of a painful soliloquy to hold us hostage, what if we took up arms against a sea of troubles and opposed them? What if we learned to accept the painful reality that awaits us accepting that we cannot change the outcomes that we will face in, which is part of human existence, for that pain is not unique to anyone. It's a universal experience of being alive, and to choose to live is to choose to experience the highs and lows, no matter how frightful and painful the lows may be. We cannot hide away and outthink reality. We cannot outsmart the ways life will unfold by outthinking it. Like Hamlet should have figured out sooner. We kind of just have to be. Thank you for listening to today's little mini essay. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider sharing the video, liking it, leaving a comment or subscribing to the channel if you're new here. Thank you as always to my patrons, as always, for making this possible, and I'll see you soon for another video. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading.